So let's go talk about this let's go talk about some Virtua Fighter content. Had like a whole slew of Virtua Fighter content after the Game Awards, right? With the new Virtua Fighter like teaser that dropped on that day. And we also had a Virtua Fighter Direct talking about like the legacy and the impact Virtua Fighter had on the, not just like FGC, but you know, just all around. It was cutting edge, it was, you know, crazy and just cutting edge back in the day when Virtua Fighter dropped. So we have this like little article from Famitsu about what's the new Virtua Fighter. Interview with Sega's Ryuga Gotoku, that's the Yakuza devs studio, with Yokoyama and Yamada-san. And they had some pretty peculiar things to say about the new VF on top of like, you know, how much of a pioneering like piece that Virtua Fighter really is, right? So what's your goal when starting the new Virtua Fighter project? Fighting games are becoming popular again, but this didn't happen suddenly. Tekken and Street Fighter series have built up a lot over the past decade. Can we catch up by challenging them on the same level? Virtua Fighter is a series based on fighting games. So that was like the big goal, is like, you know, Virtua Fighter has been technically like dead since like VF5, and while they were like, you know, dead and in the graveyard, a lot of other fighting games have been like evolving, like, you know, as per case like Street Fighter and Tekken. They have been, you know, technically evolving through Street Fighter 6 and like Tekken 8, you know? So the biggest like challenge for, you know, let's say like a Virtua Fighter to come back, or let's say like, you know, not just like Virtua Fighter, but another example like Soul Calibur or Bloody Roar. Soul Calibur technically came back with 6 as a way to like, you know, bridge the gap for new players with their mechanics, but it was very like, it wasn't utilized properly. So, and of course that also hindered, and of course, you know, another thing that hindered Soul Calibur's success was, well, 1 is online and 2 was Smash Brothers. So there was not enough chance for Soul Calibur to shine. Similarly with Virtua Fighter, how would they reinvent themselves in like in a modern era? They've been balance adjustmenting and repackaging and reshipping Virtua Fighter 5 as like Ultimate Showdown and R.E.V.O. that will be coming next month, but that's like an old game. How will they change for the new game to make it more modern and appealing to not just like old school VF heads, but also new fans who are going to be, you know, not real, well, lack of a better term, you know, indoctrinated, but impressed by VF, right? Can't say anything specific how we're going to find a winning strategy, but Yokoyama says, let's say you go to an izakaya with a 4.8 rating on Tablog in the middle of winter. It's a restaurant with only 8 seats and it's full. Would you line up at a restaurant like that? No matter how delicious the food is, I can't wait in line outside. And izayaki where I don't know when the previous customers will leave. Naturally, the answer, I can't wait, he says. No matter how crowded it is, you'll line up at a food court, right? Because you know a seat will become available, but you can't line up at a restaurant where you don't know when it will become available. So you have to change the restaurant you line up at, or change the whole restaurant. Do that. The analogy is perfect for Ryuga Gotoku Studios. By adding cultures such as the nightlife and underworld, the store has been transformed from an ordinary izakaya into a store where adults gather without changing the genre of the store as a story-oriented action-adventure. The foundation of a fighting game is impeccable, but it is too simple and sturdy. There are no projectiles. In the sense, the battles are more plain in terms of images than the effects-heavy Ryuga Gotoku. However, on the flip side, I thought this could be a weapon. Although there is a superhuman action, the images of flesh and blood humans fighting each other are just the right to match the realistic story. The realism that Virtua Fighter has been committed to for 30 years may shine even more in realistic cityscapes and world settings. To paraphrase down, right? They tried to make like the new Virtua Fighter a little bit more enticing and a little bit more organic, you know? Instead of just, you know, being like, what was it? Still and stock. Virtua Fighter, like, you know, doesn't have any crazy like character special effects like Tekken or Soul Calibur, right? Virtua Fighter is more on the realism of like real life based martial arts, from karate to Muay Thai to things like that. There's no character that like throws out projectiles from full screen or fires like devil beams or laser beams from their devil eyes, right? Of course, there are like, you know, some things that are, right, make it like a little bit fantastical, like, you know, juggle combos are there, but it's not like characters like juggling or like crazy like anime like moves that you would find in like Tekken or things like that. No, this is like a down-to-earth real like life-based fighting game. That's what shined about Virtua Fighter, is that how can you translate some of like you know, the martial arts that we see in movies and TV shows into gaming, right? And without making it, you know, super over the top. And that's what Virtua Fighter always like shined on, is, you know, there's no crazy special effects. It's just, it's down to earth. It's real martial arts, just hitting each other and things like that. That's what makes Virtua Fighter shine amongst like other like fighting games. It's the closest thing to have. It's the closest, like, if you want to be accurate on like just like the term fighting game, Virtua Fighter is like definitely the closest one. What will be the core of the new VF? I came to the conclusion that the core has maintained throughout is innovativeness, right? Which is like, you know, that's true for Virtua Fighter. It was innovating, it was cutting edge technology. Even like, you know, film director Steven Spielberg, right? The guy who makes like, what, E.T., War of the Worlds or some shit like that? He saw VF3 and praised it, saying, "It's amazing how they can do cross simulation with these graphics." Even Spielberg thought Virtua Fighter was a banger, you know? And that's the thing about Virtua Fighter, is like, yeah, this is like a 3D fighter. It wasn't like a Soul Calibur, because Soul Calibur had its own like draw in the crowd, right, for how smooth it felt and how like beautiful it looked for characters. No, this was like, yeah, it was slow as fuck, right? The OG like Virtua Fighter, and you had like OTGs, but it was fun for those aspects alone. Virtua Fighter was, you know, programmed that way for that reason. It was just more of a art piece, and that art piece continued to evolve to being like, you know, all the way up to like Virtua Fighter 5, with its own mechanics and systems that make it unique from the other 3D fighters. Although it is difficult, I think the new VF being innovative is a very important value. I think the keyword realism is also important. There are various ways of thinking about realism, but when the first VF was released, it was a time when kung fu movies were still popular, right? Appearance of the characters were stylish and realistic. As Yamada would say, I think the two core elements of the game are innovative and realistic. Of course, what we're actually doing is different, but how to make a player emphasize with the game by creating a sense of immersion and realism is something that both VF and Ryu ga Gotoku have in common. Looking back at history, Arcade immersive games developed by SEGA were also intended to increase the sense of immersion and realism and help players empathize. What reforms will the new VF bring? I fundamentally think that VF is not a difficult game. Bullshit. Players hone their techniques through research, true. So it's easy to think that the controls are difficult, but it's basically controlled with a stick and 3 or 4 buttons. And compared to other fighting games, the basic controls themselves aren't that complicated, and in the end, it all comes down to precise frame-by-frame interactions. There are many players who think, there are no special moves, so I don't know what to do first. I like to lower the hurdles in the process of getting to the bottom of it. So, kind of like, hints of making accessible controls to feel like maybe players can do something in Virtua Fighter, kind of like a special style. Is that what I'm getting at? There are many things, but at the very least, I definitely want to do something about the parts that are perceived as difficult, because the history up to now, people think it's a game with a high hurdle. I think the weakest point of VF is the characters. The reason why they are fighting is hardly explained in the game. In other fighting games, the character's background is depicted in some way. In a sense, it feels like the series has been driven by the appeal of fighting itself. Since VF was mainly an arcade game, one of the reasons it ended up that way, but I think that's one of the reasons it ended up that way. We have to make an effort to do that. It's an effort to communicate that to players. It could be a story or something like the fun of the story mode. So they are going to be making like an immersive and realistic story mode. That's what Yamada-san is kind of like alluding. It's not about changing the rules or making the screen more flashy. It's about amplifying the appeal of the matches while keeping them plain and serious. So if my role is to make VF an interesting show, Yamada's role is to pursue the fun of the new VF itself. The project must also function as a bridge connecting the past and future of VF. We plan to spend a long time tackling head-on how to turn the game into a form that people from all over the world can enjoy, and how to bring together the people who have loved VF up until now and the people who will love it in the future. Yep. Basic, new fighting game talk, very similar to Street Fighter, very similar to Guilty Gear, very similar to Tekken, right? How to make a new game that's what developers, at least fighting game developers, have to think about moving forward, is how to bring in new players, right? It's always going to be a constant talk going forward, Because you don't want to release an old game or release a new game and just cater it just to the competitive crowd or to the hardcore VF heads or the fighting game series specific heads. It's not going to work that way. We've seen time and time again that it doesn't work out. Street Fighter V is a known example. Street Fighter V was launched with the intent for competitive play and nothing else. There was no casual play. Hence the decline of Street Fighter V, specifically because it was just catered to that crowd and not really the casuals. Until it got until Season 3, which got that, but it should have had that from the get-go. Hence why it did so mixed and negatively at launch. We are considering developing it for home use, and we hope you will think that characters and story aspects will be different from previous arcade games. And the experience will be different from R.E.V.O Gotoku series, and we intend to make it more innovative, using the drama and technology that the R.E.V.O Gotoku studios have cultivated. It will definitely be a big game, and I imagine it will contain the original fighting content of VF. They're not thinking about an arcade version of VF at the moment. Just trying to run something of the same quality of today's arcade boards would be a very high hurdle. From the perspective of the development side, how do you think Virtua Fighter, the Virtua Fighter series, is perceived by young Japanese game fans and overseas game fans? There are still not many people who have played it, and it feels like it was a great game, wasn't it? And in Japan, although it was a big hit, it is still not well known amongst young people. We're gonna get something like that if, eventually a Soul Calibur Resurrection comes back, or a new Bloody Roar comes back. Right, that's gonna be the eventual thing. It's gonna be the same as what these guys are going to be pressed on about in PR about Virtua Fighter. Hey, isn't that old game, right? It was a great game, right? Back when I was a little kid. So how can you make that into a game that will appease like fans? Well, more specifically, fans will be pleased, but how will it attract younger people that are born after that era, you know? And that's always a hurdle. There are many people around me who really love VF, but when I asked them, do you want the current version? Do you know the current version of VF? Most of them don't know. They know VF, but they don't play it. Why don't they play it? I think one of the answers is that the current young generation doesn't play it. The things that are currently popular and the things that the young generation is playing are seen by everyone regardless of age, and they come into contact with them in some way. So first of all, it has to be something that appeals to the younger generation. It has to be a title that exceeds the generation that used to play VF. It can't be either one or the other. I think that's like a spot on like answer. This is like so like, you know, hitting on us to a nerve. It's crazy, right? The things that are currently popular and the things that the young generation is playing are seen by everyone regardless of age. You can't tell me a more truer statement like that than like Tekken. Once again, I love Tekken. It's pretty cool, but it's the most popular game there is. Everybody and their mama is playing Tekken. Younger people are like playing Tekken. It's kind of like, in my honest opinion, feels like the most easiest fighting game to get into. Plus, it's also, I think it's like a fad thing, you know? Remember back then when like Street Fighter was really like popping off with 6 and everybody was playing Street Fighter 6? Now that shit is like passed over. Now everybody, like even after like Tekken, sorry, not even after like Tekken, but when Tekken 8 launched, it still remained popular. There's still like TikToks that I would see of people playing Tekken. It's crazy. I open up Twitter and there's so much like, outside of Street Fighter, yeah, Tekken is like pretty popular. So the challenge for Yokoyama is that, yeah, Virtua Fighter is going to be good, right? It's going to be good for those fans specifically, but is it going to be good for the new gen or people that haven't played or touched Virtua Fighter but only heard it through like rumors and stuff? There has to be like, you know, a formula that the developers have to come up with in order for their game to be like, you know, selling. That's like the biggest like hurdle. So you have to think of a way that, of course, yeah, fans will automatically eat it up. But what about the new kids on the block? To be honest, I think it might be difficult for old fans to actually play the new VF considering their age and environment. That's also true too, right? That's the other side of the spectrum when you make like a new fighting game, right? If you make like a new fighting game, you're gonna essentially like detach yourself from the old game, and with the old game comes the old heads of those like players that have been stuck to them ever since, right? Tekken, back to like Tekken, another example. When Tekken 8 came out, a lot of people were pissed about Tekken 8 because now they have to like change up their game plan because new Tekken 8 mechanics of heat shits, heat engagers, heat healing. Now they have to think differently about it, and something new is going to be scary. That's not just in, you know, video games, but just in general regardless. You have to like adapt and change in order for yourself to, you know, stay relevant. If you are like a Tekken fan, you gotta stay with whatever's like, you know, current and popping. You can't just be like an old head and stay in your basement forever. There will always be like an influx of change, and unfortunately so, you have to like, you know, keep changing. Otherwise, how will you grow and evolve? I remember not Arslan, but a few people on Twitter were just bitching and moaning about like Tekken 8. That we have to like, you know, change up now. Until like, you know, what was it? After like a year of Tekken 8, people are getting used to Tekken 8 now. But even then, let's say like Tekken 9 comes out, people are going to start bitching and moaning about Tekken 9, and they have to like change their patterns now because the Tekken 9 new game will have new features, maybe even keep heat, but it's a new game and I have to like, you know, change myself, and I don't want to change myself, you know? I want to talk about VF as a common topic with young people. Young people can get absorbed in the new VF, and it can connect people of a wide range of generations. That's one of my goals. If I just wanted young people to play it, there would be no reason to use the name VF. If that happens, parents and children will talk about VF. I think it's essential to make a hit. How do you create like that harmonious, like, you know, mesh, that bridge that not only old fans but new fans will like? Not only the parents but the children will like it. Since the fighting game seems like it's possible that beginners might be disappointed when they are beaten up by veterans. Oh, that's a good question. It's frustrating to lose, and for beginners that's unpleasant, isn't it? I think that whether we can follow that is an important point in making a home game, and I want to make sure that we can come up with ideas to make it enjoyable for a variety of people. I think that what we have cultivated at Ryuga Gotoku Studio will be one of our weapons. How do you approach that with Virtua Fighter, which, although Yamada and Yokoyama says that like they say the opposite for Virtua Fighter, that it can be a difficult game to learn. How do we approach that for new players that don't really want to like, you know, learn the controls, but just want to like jump in? Because there are people that will like do that eventually. There are people that, I don't give a fuck about training mode, I just want to like jump in. Not saying that's like a bad thing, but I'm just saying there are players that are like that. And so if you get beat up, let's say like online, and you don't know what's going on, then you'll be incentivized to like, okay, I'm losing, how do I make myself better? And so one of the goals for Yamada and Yokoyama at SEGA or Ryuga Gotoku is how to make it immersive. How to make it, you know, easy on new players getting into Virtua Fighter, how to actually, you know, play in neutral, in mid-combat. And that's like one of their missions, you know? How to make it like enjoyable to like learn VF and progress. The strengths of VF, of creating a new VF at the Ryuga Gotoku Studio. Creating towns and backgrounds that excels in creating worlds where there is a solid world that exists. Creating backgrounds in a broad sense will bring out the realism of the characters. And they did a pretty good job like showcasing like, you know, just like showcasing that one stage for that VF teaser. It looks so fucking organic. Oh my god, bro. Like you actually feel like you're in a rural-esque like Chinatown. Like it almost looks like you're in the red light district. Let's take a look at the most interesting points of the new VF. First, regarding controls, what will happen to the conventional lever +3 or 4 button controls in the new VF? The thing I think we need to keep in mind about the controls is to make them simple. This is also connected to the original idea that the original VF had a stick and +3 buttons, and didn't really require overcomplicated controls. However, at this stage, I don't think there's any reason why it has to be 3 buttons for punch, kick, and guard. The priority is that anyone can play easily. That said, there are fans who have played previous VF's games, so I want to make the controls take those people into consideration. We have to optimize it for playing with the controller. Think that in the end, players will be able to play with those controls they prefer. Retooling the control scheme of Virtua Fighter, because Virtua Fighter is like just movement plus punch, kick, and guard, 3 button. It's the weirdest one out of like, you know, most of the fighting games that we have seen up until now, which is like 4 button or 6 button fighter, right? So I can't wait to see what they'll like make. Basically had battles with ring outs. Will the new VF game have concept of ring outs? I like ring outs, so I don't think they'll disappear. Nice. Maybe there will be battles that aren't one-to-one. I leave that to your imagination. Doesn't seem to be in Japan. It's a place that's not in Japan. You got like Akira, which is like the new design, like right here. The woman is not Sarah, but a character named Stella. So I thought that was like Sarah Brand. Oh, so named Stella, okay. There will be old characters and new characters. I'm worried about characters who are already old, like Lao and Shen. It looks like there will be a mix of old and new characters. what will happen to Lao and Shen? I hope you look forward to see that too. Leave it to your imagination. Essentially, right, I think the rest of the stuff is just like going over repeated like content. I'm just like paraphrasing here and there. This is like stuff that we may have like seen in like in the direct, but essentially what we got like the gist out of like details of the new VF is gonna be new story mode, right? That's gonna be very immersive, and it's gonna be kind of like a world tour a la Street Fighter 6, where it's going to be teaching you, but also like, you know, you get to learn more about like the lore and the world of Virtua Fighter, and not just like, you know, learning like a tutorial, which is what World Tour is. Aside from that, like the Yakuza like studio, the Ryuga Gotoku studio, are going to be helping along that, because it's going to make like the worlds a little bit more fleshed out than it already is. I've not played a Yakuza game. I would love to at a later point in time, but yeah, like the Yakuza games are so like goated because it makes like the underground, the red light districts of Japan so like organic, on top of like, you know, very weird and not very weird, but very interesting and complex like stories flesh out, you know. And controls are going to be very accessible. That's not going to deter old fans, but also like welcome new fans. And characters are going to be, you know, taking the Street Fighter 6 route. They're going to be like you know, characters that have like aged up a little bit, like we saw with Akira, that he has like a beard or some shit and a top hat, like a Chinese hat. And we got like new characters that are seemingly like they look like old characters, but are definitely like revitalized in the new like era. So it's definitely going on a lot along the lines of a Street Fighter 6 route in terms of like how the characters will look for the new gen. And of course, right, the graphics, because they've been saying immersion and realism, immersiveness and realism, how to make the game organic. Probably it's gonna be like on a technical like jargon, like that shit's gonna be like 100 gigs, or maybe even like 50 or 65 or 66, something like that. It's gonna be along like those lines. But yeah, Virtua Fighter is like definitely back, and they got a big like job to fill in order to make like this new Virtua Fighter a banger. And it already is a banger for new not new heads, but for old heads. But the biggest job is how will it like draw in new fans? And for that, we will have to see like in the later months, right? Because, you know, Virtua Fighter got announced, so we won't see like a release date that's very optimistic, but we'll eventually get like, you know, breadcrumbs of VF like in the coming months, right? Maybe we can see more of VF probably at the Summer Games Fest or something like that, you know? That's where my brain is like going. But yeah, I would be down to like make VF content just to like get reacclimated. Well, not reacclimated, just to get acclimated into VF. I would be down to like run like emulation software and play old VF and see how it is, instead of just, you know, waiting for like maybe R.E.V.O or maybe even like the new one, just to explore VF. What's the lore? Like how I did with KOF, and I got hooked into KOF, right? I watched like a big ass like lore video by Neo Geo Now, great guy. But I definitely am down to learn like a retrospective of VF and want to learn more about it. So the future looks bright for VF, all I'm saying. And I would 100% like support it. It's like, once again, as I said in one of my videos, the old king is back.